Happy Monday to Innovation Nation. My name is Robert Snyder, and I am joined here on this misty Monday with my new friend, Erica Strandell. And Erica, can you say hi to our audience?
Hi, greetings from Kansas City in the middle of the country here. And we are in the midst of a torrential downpour. So I'm glad to hear it's misty on your end, and we're in for a treat. Hope you don't hear the thunder.
That would be interesting if we said something so dramatic. We can take credit for the thunder. So, Erica, I prepared a small intro about you, and I'd love to share with our audience one intro for you and one intro for me. Is that all right for now?
Thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Erica Strandell is a Kansas City based consultant, entrepreneur, and public speaker. As a principal at Hexperian Consulting, her experience includes customer experience and strategic implementation. Erica holds degrees from Wichita State University and the University of Kansas. Robert Snyder, I'm a Chicago based consultant, author, and public speaker. I am the founder of Innovation Alliance LLC. My expertise includes educating exasperated innovation professionals how to adopt a people centric methodology. I hold degrees from the University of Illinois and Northwestern University. All right. So with intros out of the way, we mentioned our three topics. So let's ground ourselves in the title of the event, Erica. And I invite you to let your mind wander. We titled this event Music, Flywheels, and Pacing at Every Altitude. Did I get the title right?
Rhythm.
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 Thank you. Oh my goodness. Where am I? What am I on the right flight? So music, flywheels, and rhythm at every altitude. So where do you most naturally go as a first, detailed talking point and call to action for our audience?
Well, let's start off by like, can we talk a little bit about how we met and sort of
Oh,
what
of
what
course.
what brings us to the
I apologize.
conversation?
Yes, absolutely. I
Okay,
completely
perfect.
forgot about that. Yeah,
Because I do think it's important.
yeah.
And so you and I met a couple of months ago. We were both speaking at an event, and I think we really gravitated towards this idea of people and team centric innovation. My keynote was entitled "Unleashing Innovation: Transforming Ideas to Impact." I attended your session, and I feel like there were just a lot of combinations in sort of our perspective, our worldview, and also that we just kind of struck a chord as having this shared experience as amateur musicians. So, if we can just back up for just a second,
Mhm.
I'd love to hear your musical journey, and then I'll
Yeah,
kind of share mine.
yeah. So I've been in choirs since I was 8 years old, whether it was high school, church, college, a cappella groups after college, and frequent karaoke nights. And through the experience of music and listening and harmonizing and pacing, um, you know that phrase, when you're good with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so I feel I'm good with music. And so everything to me feels like a symphony, or it feels like it should be. What about you?
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I started as a classically trained pianist about 10 years, added on the oboe, so played in a bunch of youth orchestras and symphonies, and then ultimately gravitated towards singing and vocal performance in a variety of both choirs, but also like opera and musical theater. And just in having this, setting this up and kind of thinking back on my own journey, I think it's because I've always gravitated towards kind of that more social environment, and really the proximity to the audience, when your only instrument is actually your voice. So that's informed, I think, a lot of my thinking around sort of customer centricity, which I know we'll get into and talk about in just a second.
Mm,
But because across all of these different genres, pace and cadence is really one of the first things we think about. In a lot of different dimensions. I actually think we should start there. So again, we're going to kind of talk through these three topics. Let's start and with you, Robert, because I know this is a topic that's really central to the work you do at Innovation Elegance.
Pace. So I'll start with one of my favorite quotes, and also, Erica, we should check that we are indeed live on LinkedIn, because my phone should have a more obvious sign. So if folks are watching us online, um, could you put some love in the chat? Put some comments out there, and hopefully those will appear to us to reassure us that we are indeed live. All right. So, Erica, you propose that we talk about pacing first. One of my favorite quotes related to music. I tweaked a quote by a certain American automobile executive from the last century. His name is Lee Iacocca. And Lee Iacocca, one of his quotes is, "The speed of the boss is the speed of the team." And I was uncomfortable with that. And so I tweaked it. And so now the quote that I attribute to amateur musicians everywhere is, "It's the synchronization skill of the boss." That really kind of dictates the speed of the ensemble, because you can have individuals moving quickly, even frantically, but there's a such thing as bottlenecks. There's a such thing as critical path. And so you must optimize the bigger picture, optimize the combination of movements across a symphony and an innovation team. And when you are, quote, in sync, as casual or as formal as you want to interpret that reference to music, when you have synchronization, then you have a true chance at speed. But if speed is your leading culture trait, you risk ending up like so many innovation teams now that end up in communication traffic jams. If you treat speed as a leading culture trait, you risk ending up with a lagging culture trait of communication traffic jams. Speed's important, but you can only achieve ensemble speed if you treat it as a lagging culture trait. What's upstream? What is the predecessor? What's the prerequisite? It is synchronization. And if you don't know how to synchronize a team, you're delusional. Let's use an AI buzzword. You are hallucinating that your team is really achieving healthy, sustainable pace.
Yeah, and I would say jumping on that around the way we sequence the work, right? Again, let's use our experience as large, either in a large orchestra or a choir. You know, the way this works is that great conductors rehearse individual parts, right? So the sopranos and the altos and the tenors and the basses, right? They all go to sort of their separate yet interdependent organizations and processes, and work out the kinks together there before the entire product and the entire project is put together. So yeah, I think there's real corollaries there towards, I've been in innovation projects, and I'm sure you have, where sometimes it just feels like we're starting from ground zero as new teams, maybe, with the entire 130 piece orchestra from the very beginning, and it can be painful.
Yeah, you're hinting at the strength of a symphony is minimizing reinventing the wheel, because there's a sense of pace within a song. There's a sense of pace within a rehearsal schedule. I just returned from Central Michigan University this weekend, where my nephew was in a play. And if you think even bigger picture, across all the performing arts departments of music, theater, dance, imagine all the synchronization and the pacing that a whole university needs to take so that they don't get out of balance or poor synchronization, or have a student have to choose between a dance performance or a symphony performance, that sort of thing. So cueing back to one of the terms we put in the title of this event is we want to be able to have this sense of music at various levels. So in a music context, it's within a song, it's within a rehearsal schedule, and it's in across a department. And at every level for an innovation team, one altitude is cross project, customer facing, external to the market. There's cross project internal things that teams need to collaborate on. There are project specific things such as the customer journey, the customer experience, process definitions that teams need to get on paper before they turn attention to the tech, the design, build, test, and the change management, and that sort of thing. And so that's where my mind wandered next, Erica, was there are different altitudes in music, and there are different altitudes in innovation teamwork. And we work best when we minimize neglect because we need attention and skills and competence and trust at all of those altitudes.
Yeah, really, really well said. And I think the other item I'm going to put on the table is just around, and maybe it's at that cross project altitude and the portfolio altitude, which is probably where I tend to work the most. I think I talk a lot about experimentation and experimentation in being able to provide the blueprint sort of as we're learning something and as we're developing something ultimately that goes to the market. So I think there is a need for thinking about going slow before you go fast. And I think that oftentimes experimentation in the early stages of our projects and our portfolios is really needed. It can feel like we're going slow at first, but it ultimately is what helps us learn quickly, adjust, and creates that real speed in the
Mm.
market and with our customers.
So I love that phrase. I think, well, the phrase as I learned it is slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think about it in terms of the money, the cost profile of teams. When teams have too much friction and their pace is too, right, their ensemble speed is too slow, um, this tells me that there's high marginal cost. These are those communication traffic jams. And when a team is thoughtless, you hinted at thoughtful, mindful experimentation, planning. Um, we need that to clear these communication traffic jams and to reduce our high marginal cost. To reduce those marginal costs, it's not free. That is what is the upfront cost. Mindfulness is not free. And all teams need to decide, what is your cost profile going to be? Do you want to save money up front and be thoughtless up front? That's low upfront cost. So yay for you. You saved money up front, but that leads to high marginal cost. Um, and these are cultures of neglect and abandonment and procrastination and kick the can and short-term thinking. And so what I'm hoping that the metaphor of music helps us do is only retain the healthy friction. That is the collaboration. That's disagreement, not demonization, and and eliminate, strong word, but eliminate the unhealthy friction. That unhealthy friction is the marginal cost. And we achieve a flywheel when we have the right friction, the right lubrication, the right empathy, the right discipline. That leads to marginal profit if you can reduce your marginal cost. But I'm concerned that when teams shrug, if a team shrugs at imitating a symphony, you sound terrible. You have high marginal cost. And so that's another, there's a financial benefit for teams to imitate a symphony. Even if you're not literally a symphony, you want to imitate one because you care about all the same things. And that includes pace and harmony and listening. And I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'll hit my personal pause button, Erica.
Yeah, no, but I mean, not to put, too fine of a maybe a Midwestern point on it, but like pay me now or pay me later. Like you're going to incur the disruption and the confusion and the friction later on later on in the process, or you're going to go slow and incur the upfront costs to set up and build that flywheel.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have one more point to make on pace. But what else do you have any immediate thoughts, more thoughts on pace, or are you ready to move
No,
on?
I think I would just say this idea of agile and of the speed at which we can learn and adjust being maybe something that is on top of the way we work with agile, I think is something I'd like to hear a little bit from you. And the reason I say that is because I remember trying to introduce an agile commercial construct to one of my teams, where we were actually going to integrate and the way we're going to sell the project to our ultimate end customer. And I remember finally asking a sales team about agile, and they said that's what makes you go faster.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, that's interesting, because it's actually obviously what helps us learn faster. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on this, so maybe you could just kind of chime in to this idea of adaptability
Yeah.
as well as speed.
Yeah. So thank you for this question. There's a multiple choice question above my head that I'll try to bring the thought bubble out for you. When we interpret agile or agility, we can interpret it literally from the Agile Manifesto, which the Agile Manifesto used the term frequency. Over the last 20 years, Erica, your point about faster speed, the Agile ecosystem has also claimed the culture trait of speed. And at my session in Kansas City, you might have been in the session where there was someone in the audience that said they're the same thing. And I said, let me think about that, but I fiercely disagree. And so, we measure speed in terms of, X, if I'm in a car, there's X miles per hour, X kilometers per hour. And if there's frequency, now instead of a speedometer in my head, I have a calendar. I'm going to visit the coffee shop daily, weekly, monthly. And then I realized, well, another way to describe that speed and frequency are not the same thing. Over the last few decades, I've had policemen and policewomen give me a speeding ticket. A policeman has never given me a frequency ticket. So for agilists who claim that speed and frequency are the same thing, I just ask you to compare a speedometer and a calendar. And you can have high frequency. I can visit a coffee shop frequently, but the coffee shop could be really slow. And I can have the opposite. So for anyone who's claiming that speed and frequency are synonymous, I'm going to respectfully disagree. And here, X number of weeks after the Kansas City event, I'm a little bit better at articulating why I believe they're different. And I understand that the agile world claims both. Now, option C of this multiple choice question is I would ask you to consider that high marginal cost and communication traffic jams. These are not agile. If you are stuck in traffic, you are not agile. You might be frequent, you might be frantic, but you have high marginal cost. And last I checked, anyone involved in a communication traffic jam cannot also claim speed. So I would ask you to consider the opposite of high marginal cost, and that is low marginal cost. Can we consider agility as low marginal cost? As in, it's not a big deal to pivot. If we cancel the project, we pause the project, We know exactly where to hit the pause button. We can start and stop, and executives can downright jack me around. It's no big deal. I'm going to be low marginal cost, and so my books and my the themes that I talk of, my public speaking, really emphasize this notion of turn away from a culture that's addicted to speed and frequency and consider a culture that is addicted, obsessed with synchronization and low marginal cost. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Thank you for taking a sort of on that journey. I think it's really important, and I talk about sort of this idea of change fatigue that we have in our organizations, and I think it's often when we're facing that sort of discontinuous race to change. And I use
I use the word
this
lump. I
analogy
use the
that
word
I borrowed
lumpy.
from somebody else, but it's basically, when we think we need to, like, everybody's yellow and the future is blue, so everybody needs to race from being yellow to blue. And I think the reality is it's not just about being blue, because next week, next month, we're maybe going to need to pivot, to use your point, to where we need to be in a world of orange, right? So I want us to move, and what I try to do in my innovation teams is move less from this idea of discontinuous speed to an outcome to continuous innovation, which has a lot to do with a lot of kind of the flywheel concept. And I know in the chat we've got a question about the flywheel, so maybe we could sort of sequence to that.
Sure. Good on you for noticing that. I love the term flywheel. It suggests muscle memory. We're in a groove. We got a rhythm, and we can be attentive for if and when someone's out of tune. We dropped a cymbal. I dropped my oboe. I got a cough at bar 17. But I love the both terms, flywheel, muscle memory. My operations background, I've used this term factory, because we care about speed and quality and waste. And so I think flywheel did who wrote From Good to Great? Jim Collins? Do I have the
Yes.
right author? So am I correctly attributing that he boosted the term flywheel in that book? And it's less dry than the term factory. I admit that over the last 10 years, I've been using this term, an expectation factory, an elegant expectation factory. The word factory, it's dry, it's sterile. So I love flywheel. Um, I love, the dance metaphor of muscle memory, because now I don't have to be mired in the mechanics with my eyes, literally or figuratively, looking at my feet, and I can look at my dance partner, and I can look around us. I can be more empathetic, strategic. There's a difference between mechanics, and I think I'm going to try to hit my pause button here. A flywheel helps us master the mechanics, so that then our brain power can elevate to empathy, strategy, what's upstream, who else. So again, I'll pause there with a flywheel helps us elevate our focus on our value.
Yeah, and I think it's thank you for reeling me in with the Jim Collins attribution, because I think I had forgotten that. Like, I think I've absorbed it after this long, that I didn't even remember that it came from him. But I think, where I go with the flywheel is that it's kind of these interdependent structures and in multiple dimensions, that when you get them all going in a way that's harmonious,
Yay.
sorry for the pun, that's truly what, like, kind of creates this momentum, right? and speed, but also momentum and impact. And so I think of the flywheel along kind of these three different dimensions, right? The first one being us as individuals on an innovation team, or us on as musicians. And that's really where we're honing our craft, right? We're getting to be the best that we can. We are continuing to explore our boundaries and our capabilities. It's also sort of in the mindset that we bring, and I don't want to go too far in that because I think it's really more about our third topic when we can jump into that. But the first dimension is around ourselves as individuals. The second one in my model is actually in and around the customer, and it's all about being powered and the practices that we can use to be powered by the customer and the market. And then the third one of the flywheel is actually how we work together in teams, and it's really how we can unlock the capability, unlock and get out of that friction point, to our earlier conversation. But it's when you get all three of these interdependent gears moving, if you will, that we can really go fast. And I kind of fell in love with when you pitched it, right? How similar to music this is, right? As individuals or musicians, instead of customers, we have our audience and the relationship and the interaction and the co-creation that we bring. And then obviously how we interact as teams and with the entire ensemble is critical for the success of the group.
Awesome. You tiptoed into audience centricity. Are you willing to continue? So I'm digging the enthusiasm, and I'm chuckling that we're halfway through our budgeted 60 minutes and we're still like fast and furious on the first topic. But you tiptoed into audience centricity. Where do you want to go there next? Or did you say everything you wanted to say?
No. I mean, I would just say, I would just say, in my view, there's two things, right? In order to be customer centric as project teams and as program teams and as portfolio owners, we obviously have to have the practices that enable us to get there. And so, that's a big part of what I do is do we have the practices that take us all the way from the idea and help us step in empathy to envision and communicate what the customers need? I think that's a place when I talk to a lot of innovation teams, particularly technical ones, we just seem to have big holes in our understanding and our proximity even to customers in the market. And so the practices that we can use to kind of imbue everything that we do with those customer-centric viewpoints will help whatever our end product is succeed in the market. But also then it's about culture, right? Because I think it's not just practices that help us be customer-centric. It's also those really little things. It's the rituals, the way we acknowledge the audience, right? The acknowledgement that the conductor has when they step foot and acknowledge the audience. We have those same kinds of analogies in innovation and around how we bring in that viewpoint and how we respond to the audience.
Yeah. Love it. You mentioned the word ritual, and I've done some of my recent reading also leaned into that exact term. I had been using the term habits, um, right? Good habits, good hygiene, good discipline, and I do want to toss out a couple terms. One undermines rhythm; it undermines habits, and one I think nourishes and strengthens habits. Over the course of my career, I've been involved in projects that had a project plan with like dozens of verbs, 30, 40, 50 different verbs. What was worth documenting? What was just a chat? What was just a switch on the vendor tool? It's like holy ambiguity, Batman. Holy reinvent the wheel. Uh, how much does this verb sprawl reflect lessons learned? There's continuous improvement in operations, but is there any continuous improvement in an innovation realm? And so I would ask ask our audiences, think about your variability, because if you're a team that's quote all over the place, then you probably don't have habits, you probably don't have rituals, and you will not find a groove, you will not find your rhythm. So uh, I pick on the racing matrix because it's adjectives, and there's a form of speech in the English language that conveys action, and that form of speech is a verb. It's not an adjective. And so that's why I really encourage innovation professionals to, instead of trying to govern with those four adjectives, consider governing with five verbs. It's not a million verbs, but you can create a serious flywheel of collaboration, uh, managing with five verbs. And it's got upfront cost. That project charter, it's got upfront cost. That process flow, it's got upfront cost. Why would you do it at a conference? Those name tags for a conference of a certain size. If we're a conference of 3 people, name tags are overkill. But as the size of your conference increases, the formality of name tags is no longer a burden, and it's not overkill. So when you've got a conference of say 50 people, um, that is when the formality of, now I'm going to switch back to an innovation context, process flows, project charter, training materials. And so five verbs helps you imitate a flywheel instead of quote being all over the place with dozens of different verbs, that you're contributing to this acronym, the infamous acronym VUCA, that stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If your project plans have verb sprawl, you are contributing to a VUCA environment, and that erodes your morale, your culture, and your profitability, because you're a team that's reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, and I think we've all been there in the innovation program where you can tell every monthly checkpoint feels like you're completely reinventing the wheel, and nobody wants to be there, right? So love that. We have to continually get exponentially better at this process, and faster. So let's jump if we can. I'm
Yeah,
just kind of cognizant
yeah,
of time. Let's
yeah.
jump to the third track, which was around positivity and the experience, kind of the music, and the experience as the innovation team member.
So when we join a symphony, we are effectively joining a team. Um, the world of improv is explicit about, instead of a culture of watch your back, it is a culture of I got your back. Um, you mentioned something earlier, Erica, where I wanted to jump in with the phrase ensembles help bring out the best in each other. Growing up, we hear a lot about negative peer pressure. Imitating a symphony imitates positive peer pressure, because when the other clarinets are rocking out and they're doing a great job, the oboes are encouraged, like don't be the weak section. So there's this positive peer pressure that we can imitate, from the metaphor of music. um, I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I also, I also like this phrase around leading from any chair.
Mm,
Have
love that.
you heard of this?
Well, so there's that cliche: leadership can come from anywhere, and oftentimes leadership is not coming from a senior place on the org chart because leadership voids are rampant. So I love where you're going.
Yeah. And I say that to say I think every single person in that ensemble makes a difference, right? And I love this story. I think I mentioned when we were when we were speaking at that conference that
Mm.
one of my favorite of all time leadership and development books is a book called The Art of Possibility, written by Benjamin Zander, who is the former chair of or conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. And so he tells the story, and he kind of contrasts the different chairs, right? So number one, like you have to understand when you're the oboist, you are never late because you're tuning the entire orchestra. Like literally the whole thing is not getting off the ground until the oboist tunes that ensemble to an A. But there's a lot of things said for the different parts, right? And not everyone may be an orchestral musician, but there's a whole section of first violin. There's a whole section of second violin, and first violin is who we all think of when we think about the violin and we hear, right? It's the melody. It's very often the solos come from the first violin section,
The
etc.
concert master gets the handshake.
Right, exactly. But Benjamin Zander in his book talks about how the second violin section is actually who produces and provides all of the kind of inner rhythms and the harmonies for this massive string section, right? And so I love that story because leading from the second chair or leading from the second violin is such a metaphor, I think,
Mm.
for how we can all think about not only stepping up and having the positivity and the influence of those around us, but also quite frankly I had to turn it back to you because of the whole rhythm thing. So there's yet another
All right.
connection.
Yeah. Um, so on the topic of positivity, where as I'm listening to you, my mind turned to trust in each other, credibility, and in a symphony, we all have our part to play, and we trust each other to know our lane, fill our lane, stay in our lane. You know, a cello player is not going to grab an oboe, or they shouldn't. And boundaries are a key culture trait that we need to improve boundaries uh, in our professional teamwork. And so I believe that symphonies are excellent positive role models for the culture traits of boundaries and accountability, alignment. You know, there's that phrase, hey, are we singing from the same hymnal? Well, let's not stop, of course, at that one casual reference to music. If we're imitating a symphony, we're imitating a choir, we have high trust, credibility, faith, self-esteem, also humility, because I am one of 40 instruments, I am one of 80 instruments. Can my ego handle being part of something bigger than myself? There are we have coworkers, or in our past, of course, not anyone now, but who are narcissistic enough where they don't care to be part of something bigger than themselves. And I tease them saying, you know what, dude, because it's always a dude, karaoke is next door. You have to choose. Is innovation a team sport? Or, because if you're going to consider it a solo sport, opt out. That is another reason why the metaphor of a symphony is so powerful. Is it says, you know what? If you don't want to be part of this symphony, please step out. You have every right. I'm not going to force you to be part of something bigger than yourself. I recently got reacquainted with the work of a Kellogg professor named Suzanne Muchin. She's the founder of Bonfire, which helps women rise and thrive in their careers. And the concept I'm going to steal from Professor Muchin is this notion of a pointy point of view. And a symphony and all the performing arts, they're a pointy point of view. They're not this waffly stuff like, well, values based and principles based leadership paradigms. They've been around for 20 years. As valuable as they are, and this is what I'm about to say is controversial, but it's a pointy point of view. Those leadership paradigms at those high of an altitudes, Professor Muchin would call them cul-de-sacs, because we're just going to go in and out, and there seem to be very few consequences for ignoring values and principles, including agile principles and agile. There are just no consequences. I'm exaggerating a little bit, being a little bit dramatic, but if there are no consequences for disobeying a certain leadership paradigm, I believe nothing is sacred, and this is why. But nothing is sacred because of a VUCA world. And that's why I think that music is such a valuable metaphor, because you either need, it's a pointy point, it's not a cul-de-sac, it is a pointy point of view. You must opt in or you must opt out of this symphony. Either is okay, because I want the authenticity of the people who choose on their own terms to opt in. And so I think that is another point I just wanted to make about the altitude of leadership paradigm. We need to absolutely rethink and not be complacent with solely values and principles based leadership paradigms. I believe they have plateaued in their value, and it is time to consider a new leadership paradigm to govern innovation, teamwork.
I think that sounds like maybe our next whole LinkedIn Live, a new leadership paradigm. No, I'm so glad you went to leadership, because that's, I think, where I go as well, right? It's one thing for we as individuals and our team members to maintain that passion and that joy and the purpose in what it is that we're doing, and another in the requirement of leadership to set the vision for what that experience is going to be, both in the way, kind of the vision and the home key and the interpretation of the piece of music, but also in the expectation of how we are going to work together and what it is going to be like. I mean, I can definitely tell you that I have had conductors, I have had music teachers who could suck the joy right out of this incredible composition, and all of the hard work that had gone into that. I do think there is a leadership paradigm, if you will, in setting up that vision and that expectation for what the experience is going to be, not only in the output of the project and the program and the portfolio, but also in the experience that we're collectively going to create out of this experience together.
Mm. Cool. I realize that I have been ignoring any comments. So can we both take a peek to see if there are any comments?
Yeah, so let's see. We've got a couple of I tried to address the flywheel metaphor, Bill. Thank you for the flywheel metaphor. So I jumped in and provided a little bit more there. We've got a comment about intentionality. Sounds similar to intentionality. Takes a little effort up front, but can reap dividends down the road. So appreciate support. I think that is what both Robert and I are talking about is design, this concept of design and intentionality in the way we come together. We've got some appreciation about our analogies. Thanks, Martha. Wilco says TAAKB.
So Wilco is a buddy of mine around Amsterdam, and I'm going to have to ask him later what he means.
All right, I thought that was
That is not an inside
an
joke.
acronym that I should know.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe you and I, neither of us know it.
All right, Wilco says in Prince 2 or Prince the Second, there is a director. In Innovation Elegance, there is an orchestra.
Okay. Okay. On a scale of 1 to 10, I follow that at about a 4. I can ask him more about it. He can keep typing. But thank you. First of all, thank you for attending, Wilco, and everyone. Where my mind wandered, Erica, is that I wanted, and I'm watching the clock. I did have a couple more points about audience centricity before we turn to closing our closing points. Can I steal some time back from?
Yeah, no, let's go back there.
So there's 4 parallels between a musical audience and innovation customers. The first point is the harsh reality that someone's got to pay the bills. And every company, right? Customer empathy is the seed of innovation. Customer empathy, like caring about a paying customer, is the seed of innovation. Without customer empathy, that says we don't care about the customer, and there would be no revenue generating innovation. So let's keep in mind of just the strong parallel between the audience of a symphony and the audience of an innovation team, and who pays the bills. The second point is that, and these are all very lighthearted, very upbeat, I think. In music, there's an opening night. There's a lot of time, blood, sweat, and tears, collaboration. But at some point, the curtain goes up, and because of that, the metaphor of music helps us avoid perfectionism. A while ago, I learned an acronym called GETMO that stands for Good Enough to Move On. And so, in the process of rehearsing in an orchestra, we might rehearse something for 10 minutes to try to get something right. But at some point, and this applies to our innovation teams as well, at some point, every incremental minute is more valuable on something else because we've got a go live event. And concerts, symphonies have an opening night, and innovation teams have a go live event. And so these are very parallel and remind us, what are we aiming for? What is the huge stake in the ground on the calendar? Concerts rarely say, "Oh, sorry, we're going to move the concert back by a week." Like that doesn't happen. And sometimes in our innovation teams, postponing a go live event is not really that's not really possible. So I think the notion of performance is another valuable parallel between symphonies and innovation teams. The third point I wanted to make is this contrast between metrics that matter and moments that matter. For those of us who have a favorite song, or I love to choose, like there's a certain melody in the original Star Wars movie, maybe the Imperial March where Darth Vader comes onto the screen. And more recently, I've fallen in love with the soundtrack from the recent Top Gun film. The soundtrack from the first Top Gun movie had a lot of great stuff, but these are not metrics that matter, but they are moments that matter, that we remember when after we leave the concert. And we need the same things in our innovation teams. We need moments that matter, but we're building them for our customers and we're building them for each other. We are building them for our colleagues so that, I don't know, maybe we'll want to work together again. um, and then the final point I want to make, that the parallel between musicians and our teams and our customers is this word legacy. We all move on as integrated and stable as we want our teams to be. And musicians come and go, performers come and go, and we have colleagues, leaders, followers, work friends who come and go. And so all of us, we inherit what came before us. And we have to be very thoughtful and deliberate, intentional about what we leave behind for the next team. And so pick your favorite musician. They've left a legacy, and that legacy is so valuable because now, as a fan of a musician from I don't know, I'll pick the Beatles. Now I can experience the Beatles again at low marginal cost. I just have to push play. And so I think we can use those, the same parallels of low marginal cost. Just push play. How turnkey can we make it for the next team so that we make their lives easier? And I think that is a worthwhile legacy to leave. I pick on meeting minutes quite often. Imagine leaving for the next project team, 60 meeting minutes. Hey, welcome, new employee. For your onboarding, I'm going to give you a pile of meeting minutes. Not very deliberate, not extremely thoughtful. Well, the contrast to that is a thoughtful, intentional portfolio of titled assets that were governed by the 5 verbs to establish trust, credibility, competence, benevolence, so that a new employee knows, oh my God, the team that came before me, they knew exactly what to put on paper. They didn't over document, because the minute we can't assign one of those 5 verbs, go to the pub. That stuff is not worth documenting. It's not, doesn't have a sponsor. But imagine a new employee inheriting this asset portfolio. It's finite. It's not infinite. It's been governed by the 5 verbs. It is about credibility and competence and trust. And so we can talk about customers today, but what of our customers are the employees of tomorrow. And so I think that word legacy, it applies to our favorite musicians, and I think it applies to our favorite colleagues when they place a value and they have the discipline and the empathy to leave a helpful, loving legacy.
And the last thing I'll say about that, and then we probably are out of time for this incarnation of it, this chapter, is that we remember emotion and we remember the way these engagements and these things made us feel, as much as we remember the recorded version and can hear the recorded version, right? I mean, I think about the experience of live music and how much of a co-creation it is. Something new happens every time. I will say, on the mistake side or the unintended consequences, there's a saying in music that it takes performance to actually point out where you need to improve. So I think that goes to your Getmo analogy of like, get it out there and move on and respond to it. But I will also say that in my own experiences, right, I remember singing in one of the only operas that I've ever been able to sing in, but the experience that was created when we sang to the audience of the 5th graders for our dress rehearsal was completely unique and never to be recreated to the performance that we gave with an audience of adults. And I just think that has to do with the emotion and the experience and the interconnectedness of both the audience and of the creators to exactly what you said, Robert, leave that legacy not only of the leave behind, the product, the improvement, but also the feeling.
To be able to relive the experience again. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I am ready with my parting comments, my closing point. Are you in the mood for me to go first or you?
Yeah, no, why don't I?
Yeah.
Just because you've been doing an excellent job of host here. So I think the conversation has just really led me to believe that, I think you and I are both kind of on this same quest, right? I mean, innovation can be really hard for a lot of reasons, but we don't have to make it as hard on our teams as we often do. And I really gravitate towards all of your concepts in innovation elegance, because I believe that the purposeful design in the way that we work really can drive both simplicity in our process, but also impact um, in the market, as well as the experience that we have when we work together. So thank you for suggesting the collaboration and the exploration.
Awesome. You are very welcome, and it's been my pleasure. The closing point that I would like to make, and I'll try to tie it back to our title: music, flywheels, rhythm at every altitude. We believe, Erica, you and I, and many of our audience members, and I'm going to call out. So, a friend of mine who attended today, his name is Ben Kleinman, and his podcast is called Harmonious Workplaces. So, there's strength in numbers, and so it's delightful that there are plenty of other folks in the innovation uh, arena who really lean into music. The the phrase I'm going to end on tries to convert innovation professionals to consider another version of hyper fill in the blank. So I believe over the last 10 years, we are evolving into this we have hyper competitive workspaces. We can check the box. Over the last 20 years, when companies said, we need a competitive advantage, from a culture perspective, many of our cultures are hyper competitive. The metaphor of music helps us be hyper collaborative. What does it mean when a symphony looks at each other and says, we collaborate better than any other symphony I've been part of? What would it mean for our innovation teams to be able to say the same thing, to realize that their competitive advantage is how well they collaborate? So I believe that the frontier of profitability is actually in collaboration. It's the healthy friction. It's the healthy collaboration within a team. It's not about beating up on the other guy or beating up on the other employee. And so I hope our audience can consider, can they evolve their culture at any pace that they want, whatever their comfort zone is. But can you evolve your culture away from being hyper competitive, where it's watch your back, and instead be hyper collaborative? It's a culture of I got your back. I believe that is a worthwhile frontier as teams evolve, because teams are not going to be complacent, and every team has a choice. Are you going to slip into high marginal cost? Are you going to be cheap up front? Or are you going to be cheap later? And are you going to evolve into VUCA, or are you going to evolve into a culture that you can describe as high discipline, high empathy? And that's why I chose the term elegance, is it's anti-VUCA. And you just have to make a choice. Do you think you have to surrender to VUCA? Do you embrace VUCA? Do you secretly want the chaos? Or do you believe we can solve it? And I believe that innovation professionals, on behalf of your customers, on behalf of your 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 colleagues, solve VUCA. Don't surrender to it. Solve it. All right, Eric, do you want
Thank
to
you to
respond to
our
that?
amazing audience. I appreciate it, and thank you to you for creating the container for this experience.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, we'll have to, yeah, just see what's next for some formal, informal collaboration. But I also will thank our audience. Erica and I both say hello on LinkedIn. We hope you enjoyed this event. Keep the comments coming. And as you think of more ideas to imitate a symphony, even though we're not literally a symphony, your teams are not, you want to imitate one because of the 3 points that we brought up today. You want to be audience centric. You want to have a healthy, sustainable pace, and you want to like what you're doing. You want positivity. And so thank you again for joining, and we'll sign off for now.